everyone. I hope you're having an amazing day. So today we will be covering about WorkBench. WorkBench is a kind of utility, what you can call, using which you can do your REST API testing. You can do your Soql queries. Before I get into Workbench, I would like to cover a few things around Soql queries. If you're someone who has a lot of experience or even a couple of years experience working with other database, relational database, for instance, SQL Server, Oracle, you might be pretty used to something like select star from a table, right? That thing won't work in Salesforce if you're using Soql query. There is a limitation to it, and there are other things that works very different, like for instance a join. There is no such thing called inner join, so it's like a parent-child relationship what we have in Salesforce. So you need to keep those things into consideration a bit. Let me show you a few things what I meant by that. The first thing first, you need to log into your org as usual. I'm using my developer free account org. I mean, you can use your sandbox, but I will not encourage you to use sandboxes. If you are doing just merely a practice, it's better to use your free developer account. It's easy to sign into it, right? Okay, so let me take you to the dev console. So let's go to this gearcock icon. Let's go to developer console and right, so you can go to query editor here, right? And you can write, say, select. Let me show you what happens when you do select star from account. So, I mean, if you're someone from a SQL Server, you might think, right, this should work because this is a basic query. Well, it won't, especially in Soql. So you have to specify, right? And you can use it here. Right. Now, this is how the Soql works. So you can do certain things, and you can even do inner joins. No, you can't do that. There is no such thing called that in Soql. Also, one more thing I would like to mention about the query plan, right? So let me show you how to activate the query plan if you're using a developer console. Go to help. Go to preference, and there is something called enable query plan. Turn that on, please, and save. You see, you got a query plan here. So let's do select ID from account, right? Okay, and just put name as well, and execute. Okay, and just do query plan. You see, it talks about there is no index behind the scene. You're doing a table scan, right? So you need to keep into consideration when you are writing a complex Soql query. The query plan will be very handy because it will help you to write an efficient query. Because right now this is not an efficient query, right? Because you're doing a table scan. I hope you understand what table scan means, right? Okay, cool. Now, let's filter it. Where a name, like, let's see what happens. Test percentage. Okay. Right, so we got something different here, right? We got, apart from a table scan, we have something on others. Doesn't help. So let's say, let me filter this again, where ID equals to right, now we have an index scan happening behind this key, so there is an index associated with it. So I mean, you need to play around with this, and you need to figure out the best way to do your Soql query, because you can't just go and write select star from this, because sorry, no, there's no select star. Select ID name from whatever object, right? And if you wanted to do multiple, like bit where clause in statements, right? You need to be very careful with the query plan. Please, it will tell you to optimize it. So please spend some time whenever you're writing a complex query. This window will really help to you. Will be of great help, right? Okay, so similar to Soql, as if you remember, we talked about the Soql, right, in our previous lecture, and I mentioned that you can do aggregates, you can do order by, you can do where clause, you can do a lot of things, right? Pretty decent stuff you can do, but it's not a full-fledged like a normal SQL server, SQL queries, right? There is a difference to it. Okay, so if you wanted to use developer console, that's fine. But if you wanted to use something else, you can use Workbench. So Workbench, it's an open source. I mean, it's developed by somebody from Salesforce. I mean, that's what I heard. So you can check it out. So what we're gonna do, I'm not gonna go into the history behind it. I mean, all the histories are cool, and it's great to know, but so far I understand. So far, someone told me that Workbench is developed by someone who used to work for Salesforce. So, and I think that person developed using PHP or something. I can't verify it, so I don't know. So, that being aside, keeping that being aside, let's jump into Workbench. So to log into Workbench is pretty straightforward. Go to workbench.developerforce.com and you will see this screen here. If you are using Sandbox, just change it to Sandbox, and you can choose the API version you want. So I'll just keep it to whatever default for now, and I'm using production because, as you can see, this is my production developer free account, right? Okay, so if you're using a Sandbox like test.salesforce.com, right, something. Right, so I agree to the license. So since I've logged in, it will automatically take me to the next page, that is this one. And for whatever reason, in your case, if it asks you to log in, so please log in with your using Salesforce username and password, and you will jump into this page. Right, pretty cool. Right, now we have different tabs here. So I would like to go and discuss with you a few of them. So the first thing, there's tabs about standard and custom object. So let's dive into. You might know the difference between standard and custom object, right? So standard object is something out of box from the Salesforce, and custom object which you create. Like for in our case, say here. So these are the custom object. As you can see, you will have a checkbox next to the custom field. So that tells you it's a custom object, which is something you create, and then you have custom field you can create on custom object as well as on a standard object, right? Pretty straightforward. I hope you understand this concept very well, because otherwise, please do not attempt the platform dev certification. It will be disaster if you do not understand the difference between a standard and a custom object. Then my friend, you're not ready to take the certification yet, right? Okay, so I trust you guys know about it, right? Okay, cool. All right, so now let's go and choose a standard object. Let's say account, right? It will give you information about the account object, right? This is attribute, all these attributes you have. What's the name? What's the label, right? And is it triggerable, undeletable? So you can go through it if you want. And this is, and then you can look at the fields, what fields you have. And say, for instance, I'm gonna look at, so you see the different colors, right? So the colors will tell you what fields is a system field or is a custom field, right? Or true or false, so that kind of stuff. And record type info, because it's a master one, right? Okay, so let's look at opportunity. That will be a bit interesting to see, right? And you have the similar stuff here for opportunity. These are standard object, right? I just wanted to, the reason why I'm showing you this about this one, just to get you an in understanding about the information you can view on a Workbench, right? You can use schema builder to view information about the objects as well. But if you like to use Workbench, please go ahead and use it. I don't use it much because Like, I use mostly the Salesforce schema builder or the object manager, and queries I use developer console. Sometimes I do use custom build. We have custom build software where we write Soql query on it. So I built those one because one day I was just getting bored on a Sunday, so I built this custom tiny app where I can do Soql query, connect to the org for my own comfort. So yeah, if you're a developer, you can do crazy things and fun stuff, whatever, right? Okay, sorry, I digress. Okay, so that's about the standard object. Now let's look at a custom object. If you remember, we got a lot of custom objects here. Beer log. This is one of the custom object, and you have fields, right? As usual, this is the standard custom field I've created, and these are the system fields, and yeah, it's pretty straightforward, right? And then you have a metadata components. So this one is pretty interesting. So remember, if you've been following along, you might remember that we have written an Apex class. That's something to call demo, right? Let's look at that. If these are the Apex class information, right? You will see the information about Apex classes here. So let's scroll down. So remember this one we wrote before, Facebook class, Google class. Let's get into this Facebook class and see who wrote this, and the last modified date, and then ID. Let's go into the ID of it, and it will show you information about prefixes and kind of stuff, right? And it will give you even the body of the code here as well. Pretty interesting, right? Okay, and you can do update, delete, whatever you wanted to do, right? Go back to it, and so that's one thing you can see, and you can similarly do for other metadata type as well, right? Okay, cool. Right, next we have Soql queries. So this is very interesting. So remember, I've demonstrated using dev console. You can write your Soql queries, right? You can write your Soql query here as well. This is a bit more interesting. You don't have to remember. If you are someone who don't understand Soql, who don't know the syntax, that's fine. You don't have to worry about it. The Workbench makes your life much easier. So for instance, let's see, I wanted to query an account, right? Say account, I choose an account. So let's say I wanted to choose the billing city. You press Control and then use your mouse to select multi-select, right? Billing latitude or whatever, right? I'm just giving a demonstration. Let's say customer priority, right? So we need this field, and as you can see that it automatically builds up the query for you, right? And let's say you wanted to sort the result by active, so it will do auto by, right? And you can also do max record, so you 10 or 15 or whatever, right? And let's just put 10 and filter result by, right, active equals to, if equals to, whatever, right? So if you wanted to, you can do that. So this will actually, just give you an example. I don't active equal to true. I mean, I'm not sure if it's okay, yeah, active equal to true. Hopefully it works. Let's see. All right, no records returned. That's fine. Okay, so let's see. Right, it returned something. That's great. So you know what I'm trying to say, right? So probably, what I do, I'm just gonna make it order by active, so first limit. Right, so you see, it returned 10 because I said, look, I only want 10 because 10 limit. This is the Soql syntax to say, okay, limit my query to 10 record at a time. 10 records, so it returned you 10. So right, you can see this, and you can see the resultant list of metrics. So if you wanted to do CSV or XML, you can do that as well, very flexible. And if you wanted to see the deleted and archived records, you can include that as well. You can see that it's pretty straightforward, right? You can do this for any object you want. You can do that for custom object. You can do this for standard object as well. I mean, I don't use it, as I said. I mean, this is great if you wanted to use it because I'm more comfortable with writing syntax. But yeah, I mean, I rarely use Workbench. I mean, I have to use Workbench when I have to demonstrate something to customer because they wanted to test an API. But again, for API, I'll get into that. So I don't use Workbench for APIs as well because I use Postman instead of that, right? Okay, so asynchronous query, you can do that here, and you can do social search. You can do the social search here as well, right? Search for, whatever you want, say Jack, right? It will, returning objects or whatever you want to. So let's say contact. Let's say you are not comfortable with social. If you are not comfortable with social query, this is the best place you can fiddle with. So this is fantastic, right? So let's see if it returns something. Right, you got 2 records here, which is great. So that's fantastic. So yeah, you can do social query as well. Okay, now then we have insert updates, right? So what happens is, let me show you one thing here. Usually, you can't do insert. If you're someone from a SQL Server background, you know that it's very easy to do insert in a normal SQL query, right? Insert into table, right? Values, then blah blah blah. It will let you do the insert or update or delete, right? But that's not the case with Soql. You can't really do insert in a Soql query saying, oh, insert into. It doesn't work that way. So usually what I do, you can use Apex where you can define an object, class name, and then define an object and populate the value into the fields and then insert, right? And under try catch, right? Okay. So now you can do that. So what you can do, you can actually insert a record using Workbench. So as usual, as you know that, I've selected insert and I selected this custom object, and you go next, and then it will tell you what value you wanted to insert here. So I will say test value 1, 2, 3, right? So there you go, and so it's the test value. So 1, 2, 3. That's fantastic, right? So yeah, I mean, you can do that using here. This is very handy if you wanted to do test some data, but I will not encourage using insert from here because usually you shouldn't be inserting something from a database unless you are doing some sort of testing, right? Because you have to insert using from a front end, right? From a UI interface, because then you know what's going on there. So you can do similarly. These are DML operation like upsert, insert, delete, right, and delete. Okay, so that's, and then you can do data migration as well. I haven't used this feature, so I'm not 100% sure how these 2 things works because we use, if it's a data migration, different things. So so data migration, right? So migrating data, so data import and data export, Salesforce out of box feature you can use, or you can use data loader. So REST Explorer is pretty interesting. So if you guys someone who wanted to use REST Explorer, so you can query the the Salesforce. You can actually query Salesforce objects from here, and you can view the results. We can do REST call like get post, passing the right URL. You can do that. If you're using the Workbench, right? One of the things with the Workbench, you don't have to. Let me get into. Let me see one thing, right? Just a second. Attributes. I'm not 100% sure if there's a. Okay. Right. So, okay, so there might be expand all. I'm not sure. S objects. Hopefully this is what it is. Right. Okay, just a second. I'll tell you what I'm doing. Just give me a second, please, and I'll explain to you what exactly I'm doing. Okay. It's okay. All right. So what happened is, so I'll explain to you what I was doing. Using Workbench, right, you can explore your APIs. So there are two kinds of APIs, right? Inbound and outbound, right? Inbound is when you are consuming a third-party APIs, and outbound is when you are exposing your Salesforce org API to a third party so that they can access your APIs and test the stuff, right? So what I've done, I've actually, but this is how, when you use Workbench, right, you don't have to log into your org again and again when you're using API. So you have to log in once. Once you log in once, it will handshake the authentication behind the scene, and it will make sure that you get the data, right? Because, for instance, like when you're using Postman is another tool which is very handy. I use it all the time. I love Postman, right? So big shout out to Postman team. So it's amazing tool. I would recommend you to use it if you're comfortable with it. The documentation is great. It's amazing, right? So if you are using Postman, right, then when you are consuming, let's say your let me give you a scenario. I wanted to get an information about an account. Let's say this one, right? Say just a second, right? So I wanted to get information about an account, so I'm doing a HTTP request. Get request means telling, oh, can you please give me an account information, and this is the ID, right? So I got this information here. In Postman, right, when you're using a Postman, you need to provide authentication credentials, right? Depending upon how it is configured, if so you need to provide secret key and all kind of stuff. So you can do that using manage apps in Salesforce. I won't get into that. That's a different topic. So what I'm trying to say here is that if you wanted to do a quick test, right? If you wanted to see, the data that generates, so that you can give this data to a third party so that they can use your fields, right, to push or pull the data, you can use Workbench. It's very easy to use. You don't need to be technically very strong to use it. Even functional consultants can use it, right? Because Postman, depending upon your technical expertise, right? If sometimes the people who are functional, right, who do not have any technical background, they might struggle a bit. They might. I'm not saying they will. So so this is one of the thing you can use. So you can also post the data if you know how to form a JSON request. You can do that here as well, and you can patch, you can delete, you can do a lot of stuff here, right? This is one of the tools. I don't use this one, as I said. But if you want to try it out and if you wanted to play with it, please feel free to do that. So right. And it's very easy to use as well. Similarly, you can use it for Apex Execute. You can use for other stuff as well. So this is very handy tool, for a quick test of stuff, testing an API, or if you wanted to write a Soql query. If you're not comfortable with the syntax, you can use this tool as well, because as you've already seen, right, it's just a point and click, right, similar to Salesforce. It will build up the stuff for you. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to cover about Workbench today. So I would encourage you to to use dev console. I mean, that's my personal opinion, because the more you write query, the more you get comfortable, rather than using point and click. Because if you are going to be a developer, right, it's good to know this in a Soql query. If you're not comfortable with syntax, that's fine. You can always Google it, you can learn it, right? But just please make it as a habit to use the dev console or other tools to write the query, because it's good for, because imagine if you're in a consultancy firm, right, and you are a functional consultant reach out to you and say, look, I'm struggling with this query, can you help me out? And if you don't know how to write a query, well, that's not really good, right? Because, so this is okay. I just wanted to, the reason why I wanted to demonstrate Workbench, just to give you an idea about what all the tools we have out there. And this is one way you can do your API testing. You can do you can view information about a custom object. You can write Soql query, and even you can do insert, update, and DML operation as well. So I hope you find this session valuable. This is all I wanted to cover. Sorry if it's been a very short session today, but please keep into mind that for platform dev, you should know how to write a Soql query as well as social, right? Okay, that's all I wanted to cover today. I hope you're having an amazing day. Take care. Bye-bye.